Good morning. I'm Mark Matienzo, and I'm the Director of Technology for the Digital Public Library of America. I'm also presenting on behalf of Anna Naruta-Moya and Daniel Moya of the Indigenous Digital Archive project. Unfortunately, Anna could not make it to New York as she recently gave birth to twin girls just in time for Mother's Day. But together, our presentations focus on archival use cases related to the International Image Interoperability Framework. So my presentation will first define archival resources in considering use cases and applications for IIIF, and I'll review recent trends in description and digitization of archival materials. We'll then review a small number of example collections of archival materials that have been made available over IIIF as well, and then consider applications and benefits of using IIIF for archival collections. These considerations will include aspects of improving access, use and reuse, and potentially management of archival material. We'll also look at a couple of quick demos. Finally, we'll investigate a specific case study of IIIF as applied to archival material by reviewing the work underway on the Indigenous Digital Archive project. So to begin, I want to make sure that we all have a common understanding of what I'm talking about when I talk about archival use cases. We've heard a lot about manuscripts. While manuscripts could be included in that, most of my examples are really focused on 18th, 19th, and 20th century archival materials. So in this case, I'm also talking about using the IIIF specifications and their implementations to support the use of archival material understood as records held by a variety of institutions, including archives, special collections, libraries, and so forth. These records are usually created or managed by individuals or organizations as part of their lives or daily business. Records provide evidence of the activities of these and other individuals and organizations. More broadly, my presentation will also include examples of additional kinds of primary sources, as they're often held in institutions, which also hold archival records, like you saw in Christie's presentation. These records, I want to emphasize, come in all forms: text such as correspondence, registers, field books, and more, images including photographs and drawings, maps, moving images, audio, and data sets. But since this is a IIIF event, we'll focus on archival records that can be represented as images, which also include text. So in the last 10 years, there's been a noticeable trend by which archivists are really encouraged to rethink how archival collections are processed and made available for use, and how they've thought about digitization. Changes in processing models in part stem from a reaction to large backlogs of archival material, a common but unfortunate reality in many institutions that ultimately meant, in many cases, that the material was not processed or described, and most likely, as such, not accessible to researchers. In their 2005 article in American Archivist, More Product, Less Process, Revamping Traditional Archival Processing, Mark Green and Dennis Meisner write that across several surveys, unprocessed material accounted for approximately a third of a repository's holdings. The remainder of the article serves as a call to action to have archivists identify a baseline of arrangement, description, and preservation that would allow backlogs to be addressed efficiently while still providing adequate and sufficient information to researchers to enable research with the materials in their context. Green's 2010 follow-up article to More Product, Less Process in part investigates the applicability of the paradigm described in his article with Meisner to the digitization of archival material. Recognizing the work at institutions including the Smithsonian Institution's Archives of American Art and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, Green writes that increased user demand for digitization of archival records requires a similar degree of compromise, and suggests that existing description be leveraged as a navigation discovery tool whenever possible. Less than a year after publication of Green and Meisner's original article, the National Historical Publications and Records Commission announced the Digitizing Historical Records grant program, designed to test and implement cost-effective methods to scan historical record collections and to make digital versions freely available. The grant program required any candidate selection to be previously processed with some form of existing description already available. More recently, we've also heard the change in programs from CLIR to adapt their hidden collections program to focus specifically on digitization. All of this leads to a demand for shovel-ready digital collections projects for archival material, where description is ready and able to be leveraged for digitized assets and metadata that make reuse technically and legally possible. While not always springing from the same motivation, the desire of archivists, funders, and users are thus complementary. They want things faster, better, cheaper, more open, and more reusable. So this leads me to ask, why not IIIF for archives? There's a fantastic opportunity here. And there's a great community around these technologies and standards. I believe it's the right time for archives and special collections to look at implementing IIIF to improve access and reusability of material. So what kind of materials are made available over IIIF? This list is just a small sampling, but demonstrates a wide variety of content in terms of format. Boston Public Library makes over 3,000 of the 40,000 items in the anti-slavery collection available online, including correspondence, broadsides, newspapers, pamphlets, and more. Duke University's W. Duke Sons and Company digital collection features over 2,000 cigarette trade cards and other advertising collectibles. The Leo Baeck Institution's Albert Einstein collection contains letters and notes by Albert Einstein, as well as photographs, clippings, items commemorating Einstein, the Einstein family tree, and autographs. This collection was digitized from microfilm by the Internet Archive for the Leo Baeck Institute. University of British Columbia's Wallace B. Chung and Madeline H. Chung collection includes archival documents, photographs, books, and artifacts related to three broad themes: British Columbia history, immigration and settlement, and the Canadian Pacific Railway Company. Calisphere, a project of the California Digital Library, provides materials from select schools in the University of California system over IIIF, such as UC Merced and UC Riverside, including diaries of abolitionists and interned Japanese Americans, and photographs by Sabina Osuna of the Mexican Revolution. Finally, University of Massachusetts Amherst has digitized the entirety of the W.E.B. Du Bois papers and has made them available online. There are certainly lots of other examples out there of archival materials presented using IIIF, so this should be understood as a very tiny subset. So now that we've reviewed some larger scale motivations and examples of existing archival materials already made available over IIIF, I'd like to talk about applications and benefits. So overall, one major argument for IIIF, regardless of the types of materials presented with it, is that it can improve access and reusability of image resources. As you'll hear from Rob Sanderson this afternoon, the interoperability made possible by application programming interfaces provided by IIIF is what makes this possible. In particular, this can even make in-house generation of derivatives for various projects much easier. So this is an example of the University College Dublin's IIIF-based cropping tool that allows users to quickly generate a derivative sized and cropped based on their needs, using a familiar interface paradigm used in many image manipulation programs. The user specifies a section of interest, the size, rotation, and quality, and then is presented with a URL or a preview for an image that can be reused for analog or digital exhibitions and more. In addition, IIIF can also potentially provide reliable means by which to build tools and interfaces that can improve processing for archivists if the materials are first minimally processed and digitized. Building on Green and Meisner, Larissa Miller recognizes that the more product, less processed approach does not actually interrogate how archival processing might be different with changes in technology or the advent of digitization first. So one possible example to explore in this regard is the Augmented Processing Table project led by Karen Trace and Luis Francisco Revilla of the University of Texas. APT aims to make the processing of archival collections more efficient and to enhance understanding of the best practices for archival processing through leveraging a web-based spatial hypertext system with which users interact using touch, fiducial devices, or a mouse. Trace and Francisco Revilla emphasize the value of APT as helping to provide insight into how archivists approach their work, which is essential for researchers undertaking evidentiary work with archival materials, including historians, journalists, and lawyers. While the existing APT prototypes were not based on implementations of the IIIF specifications, the possibility it allows to a project like APT are twofold. First, it allows for an interoperable user interface layer to be developed within which large-scale collections can be arranged, reviewed, and investigated. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, it also allows for the potential for interfaces for a variety of users to be more easily developed to allow spatial manipulation of archival materials which can be used to develop multiple virtual arrangements developed by researchers or archivists that can stand separately from the archival hierarchy used to manage and provide context for the collection. Finally, because IIIF makes archival materials more interoperable, it makes it easier for both archivists and users to reuse them across contexts. For example, when made available over IIIF, users and archivists both can more easily reunite dispersed archival material with shared provenance into a single research interface. Many modern and contemporary manuscripts and organizational records are spread across multiple institutions, and Albert Einstein's personal papers are certainly no exception. The letter on the left from Einstein to Eric Drummond was not previously included in the collected papers of Einstein, but is made available from the World Digital Library over IIIF. But what of other material? There is additional material available from the Leo Baeck Institute, including digitized microfilm, the US National Archives, which holds Einstein's Declaration of Intention of Citizenship, and the 1939 World's Fair photos of Einstein opening the Jewish Palestine Pavilion held by the New York Public Library. All of these materials have been brought together in a single viewer, and similarly, IIIF allows archival materials to be brought together along other primary sources or even non-archival materials into a common environment for curation by topic. So here's just a quick demo of that. So this is an example of content from related to the topic of New Mexico. So this was originally assembled by Robert Sanderson, and I've added a few additional sources to that. So, for example, this is a book from the Internet Archive, which is a little bit slow to load, so I'm actually going to load something else instead. So these are materials. This is a collection of letters from Clara D. True, who is a teacher at the Santa Clara Day School in Espanola, New Mexico. So again, this appears like it's a little slow to load, but one of the things I want to emphasize here is these materials are, while provided by the National Archive, are not natively made available over IIIF. So there's actually the possibility to do a layer of translation fairly simply to get these materials to load into a viewer like Mirador. So feel free to visit the link, and I'm happy to take questions on that. So this concludes my part of the presentation, and so thank you for your time. And this is my transition to Anna's part of the presentation. So the Indigenous Digital Archive is a collaborative project of the State of New Mexico's Museum of Indian Arts and Culture, the New Mexico State Library's Tribal Libraries Program, and the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center. IDA has just received an IMLS National Leadership Grant, which will be kicking off this fall. So the project originated from tribal constituents wanting more archives education, more online accessibility for materials related to their cultures. So the project, in part, also makes partnerships. It makes partnerships more possible when it relates to when related to providing access and use of archival materials. So part of this is training relates to training about managing archives as well as using archives. It's also intended to create stronger links to communities and to institutional resources. So IDA focuses on creating online access to open government records otherwise unavailable to people and communities impacted by the historical events they speak to. The primary emphasis is related to land records and records related to government Indian boarding schools at the moment. So the first set of records are focusing on New Mexico tribes and government operations in the state, again, based on the geographic basis of the project in New Mexico. And the intent is to expand later into other kinds of records, especially related to Indian boarding schools. So there's a large interest in doing research into Indian boarding schools, in particular because they've had a long-standing impact on Native communities even to this day. There's also a strong motivation to interpret the records with the benefit of the perspective of elders and others who were attended or otherwise impacted by the schools. So this is an example of a historic photo of one of the Indian schools. And so I think one of the important things to note about this is really the impact of the Indian boarding schools. So this is a before photo of Apache youth at Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania. And this is the same set of youths 3 months later. Over 10,000 Native American children from 140 tribes attended Carlisle Indian Industrial School during its 40 years of operation. And in the industrial school system at Carlisle, only 158 ever graduated. This is particularly striking when you consider that 186 students are buried there. So many basic facts are unknown. How many children died at the schools, and how did a newly discovered unmarked cemetery come to be? So this is a map demonstrating, sort of indicating where Native youth might be sent to particular boarding schools. So there's a clear geographic clustering, but really there was the possibility of students being sent, Indian students being sent to any of these boarding schools. So because of this, different jurisdictions and other aspects of government organization policies mean researching a particular topic, person, event, or place requires access to a large amount of records by different creators. So currently, a lot of these records are really only available on microfilm or in person. So you're actually pretty limited. So in some cases, you can access these records online through an interface like this. So this is great. The content is made available. But before coming online, you often run into the issue where each individual page becomes cataloged. So this obviously takes a lot of time. And during that time, records are still are not yet available for use. So there's an argument whether the metadata being generated for item level description is really meaningful for the researcher, as indicated in my part of the presentation. So in the context of IDA, there's a particular benefit to provide effective online access without bottlenecking content at the institution. You can leverage the open annotation format to crowdsource the marking the beginnings of documents or the beginnings of years of a long chronological run of documents. While this information is being added, the documents are already available online. So in terms of this, you really need to be able to access a large amount of records quickly across a number of institutions, mark and provide context, add additional documentation and beyond, and really work together. So in terms of this, IIIF really makes a project like IDA feasible. Large series can be mass digitized from microfilm or originals. And as noted, crowdsourced and managed tagging and annotation really can help provide better navigation for these materials. One limitation is that OCR is often limited by the type of documents, and keywords don't always appear from text. So this is clearly an example of where there's a printed document, but there's lots of handwriting as well. So our OCR may not help you sort of from the baseline that you get without specialized software. There's also the possibility of augmenting description using linked data. So when names appear, you can use these to identify individual people. So overall, in terms of the Indigenous Digital Archive project, the goals are right now to create an open source software toolkit extending the Omeka S content management system, providing IIIF compatibility and support for open annotation, and to develop a use case of open government documents related to Native people. The grant project will initially work with 78 linear feet of records at a minimum in its first phase, and develop a fellows program open to the members of the 23 tribes of New Mexico plus Hopi, and provide additional support for online volunteers. It's starting this fall with community meetings to inform user interface design, and visit nativedocs.org if you'd like more information. Thank you.